Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Eddie.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Not too bad.
Good.
Good morning, boss.
Good morning, Agnes. It is really morning where you're at. Is it 6 a.m., Agnes?
Hello, everyone.
Adam, you ready for today?
Always ready. How about you, boss?
Yeah, man. Ready to roll.
Sharice is who's got the first mic? Is it going directly to Tom, or is he being introduced by somebody?
It's going directly to Tom and George.
Okay.
Yeah, I think George is going to kick us off.
George.
Or Sharice, I need to pause my screen for 1 second,
Okay.
and then I will. Actually, I have to move something. Should work. Can you see it again?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my chat window is fine. All right, we're ready to go.
I'm gonna wait a couple minutes. The participant number is still increasing, so let's give it a couple minutes and then you can start.
Sounds good.
Take it away, George.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Congratulations, you've made it to what appears to be the last day of virtual chapter officer training. I hope it's been a good experience so far. I mean, obviously, we've had the pleasure of presenting and being in person with you the last few years. And so We don't have that pleasure this time, but we have the opportunity to present what we hope is going to be some really useful and powerful information for you, for your chapter as you prepare for 2021. So today, the session is resources to power your strategy. And specifically what that really means is earlier this week or last week, you went through strategy sessions with your RVPs, where you started to kind of fill out and identify goals, objectives, first steps, and to kind of guide your strategic planning for your chapter for next year. Additionally, yesterday, you had a presentation from Casey where he was really presenting ideas for content for your chapter. So we're actually taking those two things kind of together and building on that. And our goal today is to give you the meat, the content, the areas of that strategy matrix that you really need to fill out, with the specifics of what you could do to bring value to your members, to your sponsors. We'll take some of Casey's presentation, some of the specific content areas. We're actually going to build on that. And today is really, there's going to be some opportunities where we're going to interface with you with survey questions, open-ended questions, to kind of crowdsource some ideas for content. I want to hear about the things you've been thinking about, things you've been talking about with your other chapter leaders, things you talked about in your regional session for ideas for partnership between chapters within the region. So we want to collectively gather some of that intelligence to build on the things we're presenting today, so that we can, when we send you this actual report, this deck, that we can have added some of your ideas, some of the topics you've been thinking about, and get all of the really valuable content that each chapter is doing, and make sure that we're all working from the same page. So for those of you who have not met us, I think the vast majority of you have, but we do have obviously some new chapter leaders who may not have attended a national event before. I'm George Vavaruchos. I'm with Silva Brand. Along with me today is Tom Silva. We are a branding agency that is really targeted on commercial real estate space. So Tom and I have a track record of more than 35 years in commercial real estate. It's a space that we work on a lot. We understand, we really understand the specifics of the industry. We pay attention to the industry. So we're not here to provide general marketing guidance and general marketing advice. We're really here to talk about you, your chapter, the institute, the challenges of your members, the challenges in your markets today. So this is kind of the structure. We're going to talk about, inevitably, where are we today? We'll talk about the idea of planning for uncertainty, but these are going to be really short sections because the vast majority of our time we're going to spend really honing in on how do you serve members and how do you serve your sponsors. There's been a lot of comments and questions. I know that's top of mind and a concern of who's going to renew. How are we going to continue to provide value in a virtual format to members and to sponsors? We want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them getting value from the chapter. How do we do so in this new environment we find ourselves today? And we'll close out with just some guidance on how do you actually fight Zoom fatigue? How do you present content in different ways? I know chapters have utilized Zoom as a platform to provide content to their members. We really want to talk about how do we mix it up? How do we make sure that you create a great interactive experience for your members? And then how do we look beyond Zoom? There are other platforms that may offer some other opportunities, which we'll very briefly touch on. But last year, I'd love to say that when we met you in Chicago, for those of you that we did get to present to, it may not have, we may have been thinking of 2020 as a year of some potential market headwinds, and there were obviously issues to navigate. But if we were to look back today and look back at that time period, we would really have said that everything at that time was really awesome. And it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of everything is really awful today. And, there's been a lot of, chapter leaders that Tom and I have worked closely with through the Propel program, who took kind of a wait and see attitude. We're hoping to, as everybody did, March, April, May, pivoted to some virtual programming, but we're hopeful that maybe in the fall, be able to get back to in person, keep our plans going as we had for specific events. And that hasn't been the case, right? You know, we've been in a situation where it is really hard to do the programming we were doing before in the way that it was being done. So it's very easy to kind of to feel defeated and to feel like everything is awful, right? And especially if you have to think for how are we going to do this for what could be 2021 entirely in this format with the inability to do certain types of programming. And also more importantly, what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening to us as commercial real estate professionals, what's happening to tenants, what's happening to owners, what's happening to lenders. This is not a great place to be. It's very easy to feel very defeatist. I think our goal today is to pivot you a little bit. And I think the importance here is you are going to be or are already a chapter leader. And your membership needs you to provide them value, to help guide them with content, with relationship building through what is a difficult time period. And it's not, I'm certain that when you signed up to be a chapter leader, if you did it before March, or maybe you signed up more recently and you realized what you were getting yourself into, it's not going to be a typical year. But everything is an opportunity. And I want to, Tom and I really want to have you start looking at that. Like, what are the opportunities that are available to me for my own personal growth as a leader, for my membership, for my chapter in general? What are the opportunities here? And that's really what we're going to focus on today. So as we get started, I really want to quickly launch a poll. Should pop up. So you should be able to see the poll. I want you to tell me from your perspective for your chapter, and this is just an opinion, because no one's tracking your answer. When do you believe your chapter will resume normal operations? So I'll give about a minute. And the thought process behind this is we don't know the future. I know that Tim will be kind of talking about this a little bit later today. We don't know the future, but it is our responsibility as chapter leaders, or is a responsibility of chapter leaders to start planning. So I'm going to end the poll. I'm assuming everybody can see it. Great. So we're kind of split between the vast majority believe that it's going to be the first half of 2021. Half of us believe it's the first half of 2021. Second half, 2021, about 34%. And a sizable chunk are thinking 2022. That's certainly possible. What we're offering today is just potentially, we offer this to you not because we have any knowledge that we know this is how it's going to be, but to give you a structure to start thinking about programming for 2021. The reality is that, obviously a lot of chapter leaders, and we mentioned this before, kind of froze and stopped. And we're just waiting to see what would happen. And sort of, the world continues, life continues in this format that we find it now. And we have to find a way to continue to provide value to members and value to sponsors. So we put together what we feel is kind of a sample timeline that you could potentially use. And this is really the idea of virtual programming for Q4, Q1 2021. If you have large events or in-person events that you're thinking about largely for 2021, for Q2 2021, you can potentially make sure that you're designing stuff that can be done virtual, right? Don't go in person only, because there's a high probability you may need to cancel depending on where you are in the country, the regulations around you, the comfort level of your chapter members and the community in coming to these events. And partially, deciding for Q3 and Q4 of next year, whether we're going to be in person or virtual or some hybrid of both, depending on the size of the audience. It's really, it's hard to tell right now. So it's obviously makes sense to be thinking about when we get more information, when we understand progress, continued progress on vaccines, and what that may look like, that you may want to consider early next year as a time frame when you start actually thinking about what programming could look like for the last quarter. So I know this is something that's going to come up and be talked about, with Institute leadership, and our presentation of this is only to supplement the guidance that you're going to get from them and from RVPs and talking with other chapters. But we present this only as an opportunity to have you think about a structure for the uncertainty to start thinking about programming. Now, in a virtual world where we're obviously our meetings are done not in person, I think a lot of chapters have explored and played with different formats. And I think some of them are learning that there are actually aspects of virtual programming that may be better than in person. Not across the board, but some chapters I've talked to that have a large geographic area that they cover, and a lot of chapters do. A lot of chapters do have a large, either they're a whole state or a whole region of a state. And the idea is that you can engage chapter members no matter where they are, right? They don't have to live within an hour or an hour and a half of where you have your monthly meeting. They can be across the state. And that's always been a challenge for a lot of chapters, is engaging the audience no matter where they are. So virtual kind of helps eliminate that and creates an easier participation for people who are not located in kind of the major metro areas of your market. Additionally, there's the opportunity that you're not restricted to your chapter. You can have region-wide programming. You can have nationwide programming among chapters. All of a sudden, your speaker pool is limitless because it doesn't matter where they're located. So these are opportunities for virtual programming that everybody should really think about. We're here now, how do we take advantage of that? I've talked to some chapters where they would be doing monthly events in person, and every monthly event they lost money. And now they've pivoted to virtual and they're not losing that money. That doesn't mean, of course, that the value proposition is exactly the same. But again, you can do virtual programming, you can experiment with formats, and the opportunity cost of experimentation is very low. And I encourage you to use that to your advantage. Additionally, some people prefer this format. I don't want to spend 2 hours going to a luncheon. I can hop online, 40 to 45 minutes that I have. If I have to hop off early, that's fine. But I can come, I can do it, I don't have to commute. So you may find that in some instances, your programming might change, your programming mix might change, even when in person is the norm again. You may leave some stuff virtually. So the meat of our presentation today is really going to be, how do we continue to provide value to members and sponsors? What are the strategies? What are the topics? What are the content? And so for this section, I'm going to pass this on to Tom Silva, who's going to take us through both members and sponsors.
Thanks. Thanks, George. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you. So as we think about migrating programming to the virtual world, I think we really have to start with what our members want. That's key. So everything we're going to present to you today, I want to just add a note that it's been informed by a fair amount of research. When we first started working with CCIM, we actually interviewed 50 members worldwide, and we got rich qualitative data about what they actually look to the Institute and to the chapters to do. In addition to that, we've spent just about the last year and a half working directly with the chapters and really talking to them about what at the grassroots level their members are looking for. So if we go to the next slide, we've broken this down into essentially 4 areas. So of course, this will be very familiar to all of us, so I won't spend a lot of time going through these. Obviously, it starts with education. The core courses, Ward, CE credit courses. And clearly, I've had members say to me, that's a way for me to learn the international tools and processes of the real estate industry. So just off the bat, they think that CCIM is the place to go in order to be able to know how to do business, not just locally, but globally. From there, we go to insights, and this is the more real-time, current, quarterly, in some cases, weekly information that's emerging that helps people understand what's going on in their market and beyond. And that generally is going to be delivered through your programming, like monthly luncheons, things like that. If there's thought leadership, some of the chapters have magazines, some of them do very robust newsletters, then those would, of course, be ways to deliver those insights. Relationships is a tremendously important part of the chapter and global experience, but at the chapter level, relationships really get important. And we've talked to members that have actually described the chapter experience from a relationship standpoint as like being in a small church. And of course, I smiled when I heard that, but the idea being that these are really thick, very, very personal friendships, things that people carry with them throughout their careers. They also become an insurance policy for times exactly like we're going through right now, where people feel vulnerable and they need to lean on people for referrals, for maybe in some cases for job opportunities. Being part of a chapter is tremendously important to give you that sense of calm and that sense of stability when you're going through a lot of upheaval. And then finally, recognition. You'll notice that CCIM does an exceptional job of creating recognition along the entire career trajectory. It starts with that young candidate or maybe that mid-career transition person who gets a scholarship, on through pinning and getting your designation, through being promoted in the marketplace as a CCIM, and then all the way to getting Deal of the Year or maybe a career recognition award. So all of that is a really, I think, important part of the CCIM customer journey. And so next slide, you'll see that what do these things actually amount to? What's the actual impact of these things? So I think a useful way to think about it is it's really in two camps. There's professional and personal. So professional, which you're all, of course, acutely aware of, is just being able to rely on CCIM to do your work. So given the current market we're going through right now, these are some of the things we're seeing today, is identifying at-risk and emerging sectors, particularly if your clients are in the investment side of the business, the lending side of the business, being able to know what core value add and opportunity looks like. In addition to that, mitigating obsolescence and compliance risks. There's so much going on right now relative to assets and product. For example, restrictions in occupancy. How does that, how do the current restrictions being applied because of COVID affect the kind of product, and how do you, what does occupancy even look like after we get through COVID at the office level? So being able to plan for that so your product is going to be current. Also ESG, I mean, KC alluded to this, ESG is becoming huge right now. And so there's all of these issues around compliance that are being discussed. And so being aware of that, being able to counsel your clients, being able to make the right decisions, very important. Obviously, we're going through tremendous volatility right now. $2 trillion drop in consumer spending, $5 trillion added to our debt. We're seeing, historic levels on unemployment. And of course, I looked at the numbers today, 15,000 retail bankruptcies, 13,000 restaurants have gone out of business. It's remarkable. So when you have that kind of volatility, how do you navigate that? How do you make the right decisions? How do you counsel your clients on where to park their money, how to transition, how to renegotiate, all of those things, very important. And then of course, the long-term economic value of your assets. During a time of instability and uncertainty, how do you actually know what is economically viable over the long term? That's where CCIMs are uniquely positioned to know how to sort of figure this stuff out. And then on the personal side, you know, a growth mindset, I'm sure you're all aware, Carol Dweck, the idea of a growth mindset, the person who learns from their mistakes, grows, develops skills, as opposed to that fixed mindset person who thinks, well, either you're born with it or you're not. And you can't ever really just develop new skills. Well, I think CCIMs are CCIMs because they come in, I think, having this orientation towards a growth mindset. The support network, I just mentioned, your insurance policy that gets you through times of crisis, times of uncertainty, being able to rely on that to drive your business, to really just give you a sense that things will be okay. That becomes at the chapter level. Members have told us incredibly important. And then more long-term, more altruistic is, you know, mentoring the next generation. I mean, I think all the time about how young people are going through, you know, coming into the job market in the current environment. I mean, imagine, you know, what they're going through and their levels of flux and instability. How do we help them get through this? How do we give them confidence? And then ultimately that's tied to the idea of being an ambassador for the industry. Really important to our membership. You think, for example, about other industry sectors like technology, where young people are always excited about being in Silicon Valley or being part of a startup. How do we promote our industry in that same way so people recognize all of the things about real estate that make it unique, that flexibility, the freedom, the entrepreneurial quality, the ability to build wealth, all of these things that really need to be promoted to the coming generations is a very big part of what CCIMs are able to do because of being members. Next slide. So this is the how. So we've talked a little bit about what members are looking for, but these are the actual tools and resources and other aspects that really help them do this. So we're going to go through these very briefly, but data, tools, and resources becoming tremendously important. And I think as we think about it, I think the biggest thing is people are inundated with information right now. Every day, if you're somebody who reads the business press, the idea of being able to know how to separate the wheat from the chaff is really challenging. And so the direct path to the information that is relevant to me to do my job is, I think, one of the biggest things that members tell us they get from CCIM. It's knowing where to look and knowing what's significant. Beyond that, you've got relationships. Again, I'm talking about knowledge transfer from your cohort, from your peers that help you understand what's happening. So it's one thing to read something in the press or to listen to an economist, but that person who's working in the trenches alongside you, that's seeing deals across different submarkets, that's the person that adds an enormous amount of color to what to our understanding of what's actually happening. So those relationships are very important. And then of course, disruptive knowledge. This is a little bit different than just regular chapter programming, because disruptive knowledge takes the current information that we have, which is largely delivered by tools and resources and to some extent by relationships, but that disruptive knowledge is really about structural changes that are going to be coming in the industry. What are you going to be seeing emerging? Who are the new players? What are alternative methodologies? Maybe even legal frameworks that are going to come up because of what's happening. That's the kind of thing I think that members are really looking for right now. And so when we think about the how, these are, I think, some of the important levers that the chapters can pull in order to be able to deliver and address customer needs. Next. So let's go through these. I think it's worth pointing out data, tools, and resources. Again, that idea of giving somebody a direct path to knowing what is relevant right now because you're inundated is so important. So obviously, all of us who've been in the industry, we know some of the benchmarks that we traditionally look at. You know, market comps, obviously, things like cap rates, vacancy, completed transactions, overall economic indicators. The problem that we're having right now is that the data is actually getting much more complicated. I'll give you one example is the issue of valuation. Obviously, because of the nature of COVID and the adjustments with the occupancy levels within assets, there's a real crisis going on around how do you even do valuations. We're going to get into some of the CCIM responses to this, but I think the idea that, say, institutional investors have to mark their assets to market quarterly means that if you can't value your properties accurately, you've got a real problem. So we're finding a lot of investors sitting on the sidelines, waiting it out till things settle down so they even know how to price stuff. Same thing's happening on lease rates. You're seeing people repricing leases based on adjusted occupancy levels. So here is where it gets really, really nuanced. And so where in the past, you had 10 different sources to go to in order to get the information. You could go to brokerage company quarterly reports. You could go to information providers. Here's a thing where it's not just the data, it's the interpretation. There's judgment, there's nuance, you really need to know what you're talking about to even see past what's happening. So I think this is an enormous opportunity for CCIMs with their knowledge, their experience, to be able to do some really important work in interpreting what's going on in the market so people can make really sound decisions based on what the data is actually saying. So some of the tools and resources, obviously STDB should be at the top of the list, but we're working on a project using CoStar right now. You've still got the market reports coming out. I love crowdsourcing information because of the collective wisdom of your cohort. So just as George put up that poll, those are really easy things to institute, and we should think about how we can increasingly crowdsource information, and as well as curating information for our members. So these may not be CCIM sources, but what are the places that we go to that have really important sources of information to determine what's significant? And then obviously other platforms that people are using to get information. We've seen startups that are starting to do this and aggregate information in new ways and with new algorithms. So I think there's an really important role to be played by CCIM in terms of telling people, where do I go to get my information? Because I am so overwhelmed with what's happening. Next.
Yeah, I think, Tom, also for other resources, it's other resources available to market practitioners to help with their work. So it's not just data sources, but I mean, some of them are available through the Institute with affinity programs, but other CRE tech that are designed to help practitioners complete transactions, find buyers, find sellers, along with any other tasks that might be needed with the transaction.
So relationships, we talked a little bit about the importance people have told us about relationships at the chapter level, especially during times of real uncertainty. Members really rely on their network. I mean, you all know this, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So it's so important. Member to member referral streams, business transactions. Trusted advisors is a big one. We don't use that term a lot within CCIM, but I think that's a really important one is you find people along the entire value chain. They could be architects, contractors, ownership, lenders, who end up being your first phone call when you need to know something. So being able to find those people that you can rely on is extremely important. Obviously, each other's professional development, very, very important. Being able to encourage people and sharing information, being able to help them develop. Entrepreneurial skills is a big one right now. For those of you who are independent practitioners or owners of your own practices, being able to share, I know this, having, being an entrepreneur myself, it's being able to share market intel with other people who are peers is incredibly important. And that could have everything to do with just how to maintain your operating income and your what types of things you should be planning for. And then peer relationships, obviously, just the friendships that you get. So that to the extent that the chapters are able to support and create those points of connection, we've talked to membership that really relay the fact that that is one of the biggest things that they get from the chapters. A big part of that is being really having designated roles within at the chapter level where you're able to create those connections. It may be calling people who are new to the chapter and saying, I'm going to introduce you when you come to the meeting, come sit by me. It may be sending up follow-up emails to see how they navigated. If they want, perhaps they want to meet somebody that they saw in the room but weren't able to approach. There's all sorts of ways that you can serve as a kind of brand ambassador within the chapter level. And we've done actually pretty detailed work around what that looks like. But I think that's a very important part of the chapter experience is help me make those relationships. And then of course, the chapters do a terrific job. Many of the ones we've talked to with deal-making sessions, mentoring programs. You've got special interest groups with discussion leaders, these happy hours that have a sort of structure. Of course, now you're getting virtual with that, and those are interesting and very different. And then, of course, recruitment into leadership. Remember, we always stress this, being part of an organization is one of the few ways that you can be in a leadership role early in your career. And so the fact that you're able to join a committee and then go from the committee into the executive board, very important for somebody who's in a earlier stage of their career. So let's really encourage that and try and make that a smooth journey for them. And the next.
I think the one thing to add for these is the challenge with moving some of these formats virtually, right? So we're talking about these opportunities. We'll show you later chapters that have moved some of this programming virtually and what they've done to keep up that level of engagement. I think that's what's really critically important. I put structured happy hour on here because it is really important that any programming you put in place virtually has to have a game plan. It can't just be like a happy hour mixer that you might have in person. There has to be goals, there has to be outcomes, and even if it's social in its measure, it has to have a structure and containment and a moderator and a host.
So I wanted to show you all an example of what disruption looks like. So these are the things that we're tracking right now. Obviously, KC's done an absolutely tremendous job and so for those of you who were in his session yesterday, I mean, a lot of these will look familiar. But these are the kinds of things that people are really talking about and trying to get their arms around. I'm going to go through them very, very briefly, but I think they point to things that at a programming level that could be really harnessed by the virtual environment and things that we could be using to develop into sessions. Negotiating relief is a big one. That's the here and now. For people on the user side, it's about rent forbearance, concessions, incentive packages. One of the things I've been thinking about is the CCIM interest-based negotiation model. And all of you are practitioners of that. We acknowledge it, we hold to it as a kind of Hippocratic oath. And the idea is when you're negotiating relief, New York Times did an article about this, how do you make sure the person on the other side is also, it's a win-win? It's really hard. And CCIMs, really have the knowledge to be able to understand how to negotiate that because it is very challenging. The same on the lender landlord side. You've got loan workouts, foreclosures, refinancing, all of these things that are really becoming issues. For example, in Chicago, we have a large retail owner, REP, retail properties, that collected only 65% of rent in Q2. 65%, if you can imagine that. So like, it's extraordinary how some of these landlords are going to be able to service their debt. And I think these are issues that CCIMs have a real part to play in terms of helping to get through this, which leads into what the future is going to look like. So I just mentioned that we have been used to tracking data with our sort of traditional benchmarks and sources. But I think KC makes a terrific point in that there's some new indicators we need to pay attention to. And this is where the chapter could be helping. Tracking just COVID cases as an example, because that is the ultimate indicator of where occupancy restrictions are going to be in place. And maybe even upcoming CapEx, which we'll get into in the next column, for the properties that we're currently managing. CMBS, 14% delinquency rate right now. And I love what Casey said, it's the canary in the coal mines for what's going to happen to bank lending. So if banks rely on securitizing debt and they cannot securitize at the same levels, they got to keep those loans in their balance sheet. What happens to their lending practices at that point? What does credit look like as a result of that? And then Casey talked about just tracking TSA, rail, and ports as an indicator of what product types are going to be flourishing. Obviously, we all know that ports leads directly into things like big box, high throughput industrial, last mile. That we've got things like air traffic, which are indicators of things like hotels starting to come back. So there's correlations here that Casey's drawing that I think are really important as we start to think about what to pay attention to. One of the things that's important, and I think Casey said this, real estate is a lagging indicator, as we all know. It's 6 months generally behind what's happening. And so if you can get ahead and get a little bit further up the food chain and not be lagging, if we can be a month behind, I think then we're really doing something incredibly important for membership in being able to read the tea leaves. Briefly, the COVID CapEx, we call it. If there are occupancy restrictions, if your densities are going to go down, what does that do to the open floor plan? What does that mean for HVAC in terms of air exchanges and air filtration systems? Touchless amenities. You've got occupancy monitoring, which is part of contact tracing. Those are all CapEx costs. So as an owner, and then as your owner's rep, as your landlord rep, what are you going to be doing in terms of counseling your clients and how they should be thinking about it at the asset level? Survive and thrive is just really about the emerging. We talked about wanting to turn everything's awful into everything's opportunity. And this one, I think, really speaks to that, is even in the middle of this kind of historic sort of economic crisis, we're seeing new emerging categories. Supply stock industrial, which KC mentioned, is really this idea that you're going to have big box distribution hubs that are going to be charged with having an inventory of 3 to 6 months, or PPP, pharmaceuticals, personal hygiene products. All he equates it to the National Oil Reserve, but this idea of starting to inventory again for all of us who grew up during just in time. And this is a completely new idea that's coming back. It's actually an old idea coming back again. We've got telemedicine, obviously. I've done several telemedicine calls, and that's going to open up opportunities for things like data centers, customer service locations, click it and pick it retail, and the whole idea of curbside delivery and what does that look like. Suburban redundancy offices I find fascinating. Reverse migration from the urban core, where people don't want to be in high density environments, back into suburban offices, perhaps in mid-rise office buildings with surface lots because they are less dense, closer to where people live, and give you a place to do things like maybe, team meetings or whatever it is when you need them. One I'm fascinated by is cloud kitchens. I don't know if all of you, I don't think it was in Casey's report, but the idea being that, we've had 13,000 restaurants go out of business. Restaurants are trying to cut their operating overhead. So the idea being, don't support an entire restaurant space, particularly if it's not being used. Rent space where you can just have a kitchen and co-locate those kitchens. And so people are talking about cloud kitchens as sort of the new self-storage, the new data center that is going to niche product that can deliver double NCREIF returns and starts to become this really interesting alternative play. And then finally, to reiterate, CCIMs have unique skills to future-proof the industry. You all have tremendous nuanced understanding of financial instruments and vehicles and structures. So the idea, this comes from KC, of curing banks and life insurance companies. I mentioned that banks are really right now all about debt sales. Particularly if they can't securitize, what do they do with all that stuff in their balance sheets? Then you've got institutional investors who are all about valuation, being able to park money. Bonds are trading at 1%, so they still need to get money out the door. It's just that there's so much uncertainty, they don't know where to put it. And that's where CCIMs, I think, offer a tremendous amount of expertise. And then Casey mentioned vulnerable sectors. He's looking at delinquency and bankruptcies and seeing sectors that are going through a lot of turmoil, entertainment, energy. So that's all distressed real estate potentially. They're going to need workouts. Perhaps there's going to be some special servicing that'll be part of that. But what does that all look like? Also, areas where CCIMs have tremendous knowledge. And then finally, we talked about valuation. And Casey made an excellent point, which is DCF. And the way of doing DCF that would allow you to sort of like accommodate things like COVID. Casey also talks about starting to read earnings reports because they're a very good indication of what's going to happen in the next cycle. So these get into, I have to say, some of the most sophisticated type of real estate programming I can possibly imagine. But I think it's there. And I do think that CCIMs have the unique skill set that allows them to be the place where people are going to go for this kind of stuff. So again, disruption I think, opens up tremendous opportunities for what the chapters and the Institute, of course, but what the chapters could be doing for their membership.
Okay, great. So this is obviously a deep dive into different themes and topics that you could be programming as part of Disruptive Knowledge for your chapter. What I want to do now, we're going to move really quickly with this, is I want to make sure that the conversations that you've been having with your chapter members, with other CRE professionals in general, about the information that you want to know about, I want to kind of pause here and crowdsource some of that so that we can take what we've presented you here, add additional topics and ideas that you've been thinking about, and provide this slide deck to you with a more complete listing of topics. So I want you to use your chat function right now. And I want you to consider a few questions. So I'm going to present these. There's 3 questions, and just kind of rapid fire, just put in your answers as it relates to topics. The first one is, what is keeping you up at night? There's a lot of things keeping a lot of people up at night, but if we focus really on as a chapter leader, as a CRE professional, what are the things that you're most concerned about and feel like you need? There's information or there's knowledge or there's things that are going to help you navigate that. So you can use a chat function and make sure you just send to either all panelists. I don't know if you have the opportunity to send to all attendees, but we will take all this information, we'll add it into this this matrix. And then Charisse, I'm not able to see Q&A. So if there are questions in there for myself or Tom, I'm not sure why I can't see it, probably because I'm projecting my screen. See a lot of comments about finding the true bottom. Deal flow, the future with and without a vaccine, reuse, repopulation of office space. I'm going to add one more question into this right now. And this is kind of building on, maybe you've already answered it, but which CRE topics have you been thinking about specifically or maybe discussing with other chapter members? So if you've been thinking about content, what are some of the topics you've been discussing? So again, both these questions, you can throw them in there. A good question on, how do you configure workspace in the future, but is it wasted money if a vaccine or other therapeutic will make it unnecessary? That's a serious concern when it comes to CapEx. Okay, and the last question, what do you need to know that you don't know now? If there's anything else that, because you've answered a lot of these, I feel like your answers so far cover a lot of these topics, but if there's something specific that you can think of. I'll give you about another minute, and we'll keep moving. Okay. Feel free to keep adding those comments. I'm going to keep moving because we went a little too deep in some of the previous topics. So there's a lot that we want to cover with you as it relates to bringing value to sponsors and chapter members. So really quickly, I'm going to present a case study to you of a chapter that I think has done a really good job in creating a virtual only program. And this is from Central Texas. They called it Market Restart. And they launched it in June. And obviously they gave it an identity. This is not a session that existed before. It was designed fully virtually, even though in discussion with Nick Nelson and the chapter leaders, they had talked about it a while ago. But what's really unique here about this program is that they've designed it with obviously presenters in mind. So you have presentations from experts, but they do extensive use of surveying and question asking. So they actually collect and gather and organize intelligence from the people participating. So this is not a passive event where you as an attendee just sit and listen to a speaker. There's quick presentations, and then there may be a very not long, but a very complex survey of questions that pertain to what's being presented so that you can present your perspective. So it creates a lot of interaction. It creates collective intelligence among all these CCMs that are coming together. And it helps them accomplish obviously these goals of growing relationships, cultivating knowledge, everyone becoming an expert. Really, really important. These are the topics that they chose. June was getting ready. July was about user decisions. August, investor decisions. But I think what's really important is obviously the features of the surveying. I'm going to show you, for example, a typical format of what they do. And you'll notice they break it into two different parts. They have the first hour, if you will, which is a general audience. That's your chapter that's going to be attractive to it. They've got a legal minute where basically a legal sponsor gives an ongoing update on what's happening relative to legal issues pertaining to the moment. They highlight a different sponsor. They go into the market pulse, which can have 2 to 3 presentations, quick hits, 20 minutes plus Q&A. And then you have 15-minute session where there's guided survey questions. And they use the survey feature within within Zoom. They use the survey feature within SurveyMonkey. And so they use this to create dialogue, discussion, and data. And I think that's a really unique opportunity. Then they break. So for those people that want to, that's all they want to participate in, they're out. It's an hour. The second hour of time depends on what the month is. They might do a deals and drink session, or they might do asset breakdown group. So far, the chapter's not been able to do an asset breakout group because they haven't gotten, they feel the number of attendants to be able to do that, but they have done deals and drinks. So if you want to learn more about this, obviously reach out to me. Also, Nick Nelson at the chapter, his email's here. Happy to talk more about it. Happy to allow CCMs from other chapters to participate and attend, see how it's done. I want to highlight 2 really quick sessions. You know, this is a chapter, Oregon, Southwest Washington, that does marketing sessions, have always done them for a long time. They pivoted this to virtual very seamlessly. Now, they're getting lower turnout, but as a chapter, they're not losing money every week or every month on the expense of the venue. And they're looking at ways to bring more value. Now, this is the opportunity to present the properties as a chapter member only benefit. They're looking to create other opportunities for more peer-to-peer sharing that is exclusive to chapter members. And I think that's really the key thing here, is opportunities to serve just your chapters, your chapter members. I want to highlight really quickly this mentorship program. This is from Georgia. They launched this for what would be candidates in January, so right before this hit. And this was meant to be in a person-to-person mentoring program, people meeting, one mentee, one mentor meeting in person. COVID hit and they pivoted very quickly. They went fully virtual, obviously, because they didn't want people meeting in person. But instead of one-to-one mentoring, they went to group. So all of the mentees log into a Zoom once a month, and there they're presented from a mentor talking about their journey into the commercial real estate industry and answering a lot of questions. So this has actually worked better because the mentees have learned from all of the mentors. They focus on a high energy. So every time people log in, there's music, there's introductions, there's video. You know, you have to be in a video feed. They created ongoing communications with GroupMe, which is a group chat among all of the mentees. And the results have really been amazing for them. They've had significantly more mentees sign up for designation courses than they expected in a short time period, 9 months. They've actually had one mentee who completed all of their designation courses online since the pandemic hit. So this has materially led to improvements in their program. And then obviously with virtual, there's this opportunity for regional programming. Really, this is about cross-marketing all your events, coming up and collectively working as a chapter at a regional level on collective programming, and not just, you know, just for your membership. And then additionally, the opportunity to do large format programming, which I think I'll have the opportunity to talk about. Charisse, Rich, we're at pretty much time, but there's still obviously some content to cover. How much more time am I allotted, if at all?
I want to be careful to speak for the producers here, George, but I know that we've already notified Tim that it'll probably be closer to 12:05, 12:10. So if you need a few more minutes, I think it's okay.
Cool, okay. I'm gonna keep moving. We're gonna, serving sponsors, this is really, this is an area of concern. And Tom, I'm gonna move really quickly through this section. There is a question of renewal. There is a question of how do we continue to provide value in ways that have been a challenge for us since we can't do these in-person events. And sponsors are looking for, it's obviously, it can be very transactional. It is when it comes down to making the decision on to renew or not. it is typically transactional unless you're able, it's a personal friend and you can twist their arm. But you have to find ways to bring them value where they are right now. The reality is nothing has actually changed. I mean, we may think that we don't know how to bring them value right now. The reality is that nothing has changed in terms of what they're looking for. They're looking for recognition. They're looking to build relationships with your members so that they can drive business. So what matters in a virtual environment is less of them handing out stuff or having a display and more of them presenting their expertise. So you have to focus on what can this sponsor deliver of value to my members? How do I position this sponsor in a place where they become a trusted advisor and the first call to members? That's pivotal. It's so important. You're going to have a retention strategy, and it's going to have to be specific to each sponsor. You really have to. I mean, this is based on conversations with chapters. You're going to reconsider your tiers, and you reconsider your benefits. Just because you can't obviously offer half of the benefits that you did before. They're different now, and the reconsidering is really along the side of which one of my sponsors can become these trusted advisors that can provide value through presentations, through their knowledge, and which ones are more just my first call because I need a paving company, right? It's a contractor that provides a specific service, and you want to obviously use them because they give money to the chapter, but they ultimately right now aren't in a position to provide insight and intelligence to your members. So you have to kind of distinguish between those that can play the role of trusted advisor and give expertise, and those that you want to serve and you want to make sure that they are getting business from your members because they support your chapter, but they're not in a position right now to be that trusted advisor through guidance and intelligence and insights. On the right here, you just see, I think, something really cool the Pirates did. You can't be in person at their stadium, but when a ball is hit to your seat, if you're a season ticket holder, they'll mail you the ball. And I think that's, this is not something they ever would have thought about doing last year, but this is the reality they're in, and they're pivoting to make sure that they stay close to their season ticket holders. Then 2021, they have that opportunity to welcome that person back. So I'm going to highlight North Texas of what they've done with their sponsors. They call them Power Partners. They've given a platform to any Power Partner who wants to present during a bi-weekly meeting. And they've obviously focused on making sure that those partners provide valuable information. This is not just an infomercial. Pretty much everyone that they've offered it to they've offered it up to all sponsors, and anyone's had the opportunity, and they're taking, they've gone through kind of the roster of people that have presented, and they close every session with a moderator asking the sponsor who's presented, how can we work with you? How can we drive referral business to you? So they create that relationship of asking how we can support you, asking how we can drive referrals to you, allowing them to ask the sponsor to ask for the business of CCIMs. And they always talk to the sponsor in advance to ensure the content's relevant. So the results of this, they had this lawyer, Christopher Sullivan, who presented it back in, I believe, early May, late April. And this sponsor received more than 20 plus leads from their presentation from CCIMs that were on this Zoom meeting for North Texas. That pays for many years of their sponsorship dues. Additionally, the chapter gained 2 sponsors since March. So in a time period where it's difficult to raise sponsorship, they were able to do so. So I'm going to close here with some opportunities on how to make it work in a virtual environment. If you're going to create virtual programming, let's make it unique. I think this is what I would guide you to do, is create something like like Central Texas that is designed to be a virtual program. Don't call it a luncheon. Don't just take something you're doing. If you're gonna create something from scratch, or if you're looking to create more engaging content, make it unique. Make it something that it represents the value proposition of what you're going to offer them. So we've created branding around this idea, the concept of stay sharp. These templates, these logos, they're available in Canva. But the idea is your goal is to give your membership the tools, the resources, the data, the disruptive knowledge, and the relationships that they need to continue to succeed in a very difficult marketplace. So just some examples of what it could look like. So these, again, for those of you who work with Canva, or if your administrator works in Canva, these templates are available. So you can use this concept, this idea of stay sharp, to represent this programming that we feel is going to communicate to your members and to your sponsors too, from their perspective of being attached to some of this programming, what you're trying to convey. And I think some of the most important lessons that we've learned from chapters that have been successful, an organization have been successful in virtual programming, is you need to treat it like it's in person. Choose the right hosts. You don't have to have one host, but they have to have energy. They have to have the ability to engage with your speakers, to be the MC. Consider MC training for all of your chapter leaders. Have a run of show. That's an agenda. Have an agenda and a time frame. Today is from myself and Tom's perspective, is actually proof of why you should have an agenda, because we definitely have run over time and feel like we're not delivering, not able to cover each slide the way we want to slide. So it's easy for that to happen. So making sure you have that run of show is critically important. Don't be like us right now. You need to prepare your speakers, have a test run, make sure there are seed questions. You do not want to have a session where a speaker presents and then they're done and there's no questions. So have seed questions, give them to them in advance, allow them to think about them, to come up with valuable answers. Use that quick, fast pace to move through it. This is where I think I'm going to close, and that's the idea of you need to engage your audience. Central Texas does this really well. Have multiple opportunities for audience engagement. Do whatever you can to make sure this isn't a one-way street. Use your breakout groups. I know some chapters are starting to use them. Put a moderator in each one, focus on a topic, focus on a property type, and then obviously use surveys. Use the surveys to understand what you need to be covering, because things are moving so quickly, to gain and build intelligence collectively from all your CCIMs, and to get feedback on what's working. If you want to move beyond Zoom and host virtual conferences and marquee events, I think this was a question from Sharon on the monetization of your online programming, you may want to consider something like Hopin or Run the World, which are platforms that create more of a conference type environment. So they have expos for sponsors, they have network sessions that are kind of like one-on-one random collections of meet and greets with people. This is that you can have multiple sessions of content. This is really great for regional level programming. You want to consider this, certainly something that we're happy to talk about in the next coming months. And that's it. That was a very full hour. We covered a lot. I don't know if we have time for Q&A, but I'm happy to stay on if you want to put the questions into the chat, and I'm happy to answer them, because I know we have to keep moving with Tim.
Hey, George, it's Holly. When we come back from our brainstorming breakout, this is great content and a great segue for what we're going to be working on this afternoon. Will you be able to kind of hang out and be around if some of our ideas are kind of sketchy, or we need to like broaden or ask another, kind of enlighten the question or broaden, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Just let me know what time and where I need to be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. That I will close.
All right, just a moment.
Is this my cue?
Bobby, Adam?
Yep, that's your cue. You're on, Tim.
Got it. Thank you so much. First, let me say thanks so much to George and Tom. Always hard to follow you guys with all the detail and Tom's silky smooth voice. So just thank you all everything, so much for everything you do.
Thanks, Tim.
Also, thanks to Bobby and Adam and Eddie and Holly for doing everything y'all have done to put this thing on. It really is. It's an incredible production, and to all the staff. And thank you very much for doing all that. George, I can see you on my screen. Is my volume okay? Too loud? Not loud enough?
Good.
Good volume, Rich?
You're great, Tim. Yeah, you're
You're
great.
good.
And, if I could ask anybody who's not Tim, if you could mute yourselves, that'd be fantastic.
All right. First, thank you so much for just having me for a couple of minutes to talk. And first, I want to take us back to kind of the world when it shut down, and think back to that moment. And March 16th, I liken it at the time to the Tower of Terror, that ride at Disney World, where literally the bottom just dropped out, and all you can do is grab onto the handrails and hang on. This thing is shaking you around, and you have zero control over what's going on. And to me, that is what that time felt like, those 2 or 3 weeks. And I don't know if y'all are like me, but I reflect back on it, and it's almost like I replay it in my head in slow motion, or like I'm watching it like some weird out-of-body experience. It was kind of that just fluid. March 16th to the end of the month, nobody had any clue what was going on. And it was at that moment that we had to pivot, and we had to deal with the questions of, what do CCIMs need right now? What do our course participants need right now? And what do our chapters need? And those became very real questions very quickly. And so the first is education. And we were forced to, over that week or two, understand that in-person classes as we knew them ceased to exist. And y'all know that all too well, as we all went through that together. So the first task at hand was to simply get all the courses converted to virtual. That we had, and we're very fortunate that we had virtual classes to just plug in, but it just wasn't that easy. We have we've had to train up new instructors to handle the volume of courses. In China, there was an in-person class that I think in the course of 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, they converted to online, which is an incredibly hard task to do. And that was a staff and volunteer-led effort. And since then, the good news is we have had thousands of real estate pros now go through our virtual courses. And so I think it's something that we ought to be just incredibly proud of, that the ability to pivot and continue to deliver education, which is at the core of what we do. Next is advocacy and legislative work. I mentioned the Tower of Terror and that fluidity. When we were all busy grabbing the handrails trying to figure out what in the world is going on, NAR, and more specifically RPAC, was on the Hill lobbying on our behalf. And it's kind of easy to say, and what RPAC does, it's always kind of a little nebulous, you're not quite sure what to point to. Literally, when we were reaching for the handrails, trying to hang on tight, RPAC, don't forget, they are the second largest lobbying organization on the Hill behind the Chambers of Commerce. They were on the Hill with the Mortgage Bankers Association of America, and Greg Fine was in the head of NAR's ear. He was asked to be the commercial voice in his ear. And the work that they did at that time, I can't say that they got rent included in PPP. That would be an overstatement. But to say that they made sure that rent was included in that conversation is a correct statement. At exactly the right time, we had the right people representing our industry on the Hill. Next, a way that we have pivoted to help individuals is the COVID-19 resources page. I hope everybody here has had a chance to kind of look at it, use it. I know at our company, we have actually lifted some stuff from here and helped to build out our webpage. This is just a wealth of information on COVID and how to adapt to it. Next, we have something we've touched on before, and I think it is part of that ability to pivot and deliver content and be part of the answer. And that's KC, and my guess is everybody here representing your chapter has had some interaction with KC at some point, and his ability to kind of come, either do a session with your chapter. He did, let's see, 9 regional sessions in a 2-week period. I mean, KC has been an incredible strength to our institute, and I think we need to continue to kind of utilize him and learn from what he has to say. Next, we had we've updated our courses. We have updated over 13 courses from construction management to improving retail investment returns with some post-COVID content. And this kind of gets to part of the core of what Ward Course is all about, and it's about delivering timely information in a timely manner. And this is an example of something that we are doing to make sure that our information is relevant to people today, relevant to people now. And then last, what we were able to do is we were able to, so that was with what we were able to do helping individuals. And so that was kind of, how can we help all of our members? The second part of this conversation was, well, how do we help the chapters? Because our chapters are out there and literally they kind of were just like us, scrambling. So first, we were able to provide the Zoom accounts for y'all. And I hope that everybody here is using it to the best of your extent. But it was something that we could push out fairly quickly and allow chapters to start to evolve, if you will, and figure out this new world order and how we can kind of interact with one another. I think most of us are brokers. We come out of that world or we service that world. I think by definition, we are social creatures. And this interaction, Tom was talking about the relationship and the importance of that, especially at the chapter level. And this ability to engage is simply crucial. And the Zoom accounts provided to the chapters hopefully allows for that. Secondly, we expanded the criteria for a designation promotion grant campaign. So this is to allow chapters to have additional ways to reach out and apply for a grant and help to help the chapter, but also help our members through creating engaging campaigns and promoting chapter retention things and things like that. So expanding the grant program criteria is another way of trying to kind of reach out. Next is just more marketing resources. There's with Canva, with the, what was the George Stay Smart, that looks like a fabulous campaign with the template that allows y'all to go ahead and just cut and paste and take that stuff and move on. And so I think that being able to provide that kind of marketing support is wonderful. And then lastly, the education revenue share program. Again, you know, back to my Tower of Terror analogy, we were hanging onto the handrails, just trying to figure out where this sucker was going. And the chapters were at a dead standstill. And so we were able to push this out, and we are just proud and happy that we could be there at a time of need when literally a lot of chapters had zero revenue. And so we are proud that we were able to do that. The program is under review right now. We're trying to figure out what a sustainable ongoing number is, but we stuck our finger in the dike, and hopefully it helped at the time when people needed the help the most. Next, I kind of want to move on to, you're not alone. You know, you're part of a broad community of folks, of volunteer base, professional staff, peers, and we're going to succeed through this thing together. That's how it's going to work. I'm optimistic that we will be back in the saddle by middle of next year. I don't know anything that nobody else doesn't know. It may be earlier in the year, it may be later, but mentally, I have to hook on something to kind of program my life around. And so I'm optimistic that we'll be back in the saddle by then. But kind of two comments that I want to make to y'all as chapter leaders, and I also make it to myself as the national leader next year. We can't mail it in. Our chapters need us now more than ever. We didn't choose this time, but here it is. And so we need to bring our A game. Secondly, I want each of us, me and you, to be able to look back and say, man, I gave it my all. I don't know if it was perfect. I hope it was good enough. But to use a sports analogy, I left it all on the field. Seriously, at times like this, it's not when character is made, it's revealed. And I want to believe in myself and for you, this is going to be our finest hour. On the next set of breakout sessions, we're going to be talking about multiple scenarios. You'll be meeting with people, and you'll kind of, to harken back to next year, is going to be a hybrid year. It's going to be a year that's going to have a little bit of everything in it. So look back on that, and it's a chance to reimagine your chapter. And you may go through a reimagining process and come out and say, I want it to look exactly like it looked when we went in. But don't be afraid to ask, how can my chapter be better? How can my chapter be different? Do we need to offer classes? Is that a risk reward profile that my chapter wants to take? All these other things. Take this opportunity to reimagine and re-envision yourself. Now, also take this time to connect with your other chapter leaders. And I'm sorry we're doing this online, but the truth is next year, hopefully we'll be in person. It is the relationship and the connectivity. Again, Tom, back to that relationship thing that you point out about the chapters. It is to me the thing that has made CCIM so special in my life. It has been the relationships that I formed. And so we need to continue to work at those relationships. Don't just put them on hiatus for the year. Continuing to encourage that interaction with your chapter members. Next is the President's Cup. We all want to have a good year. You've got a roadmap out there, and it's called the President's Cup application. If you look at that spreadsheet, and it is a humdinger of a spreadsheet, it has got everything on there to do to have an excellent year. Now, you're going to have to modify it, as they touched on, you're going to have to kind of move the pieces around a little bit. But if you go to that application and you do what it says, you will have an excellent year. You just cannot have an excellent year if you truly embrace that thing. And last, at the national level, we are only as good as the folks that are coming in. We are only as good as the next gen. And y'all, truth be told, are the next gen. You're the chapter leaders. There are, I can't see because I got to block 100, 125 folks on this call right now. And out of that group is going to be our next level of leaders at the national level. So if you're thinking about it, sign up for something. Sign up for a committee. We want you involved. We need you to speak up. We are stronger with more people. We are stronger with a diverse group of people coming to the table and bringing their perspectives. So please, I really do want you to think about it. You're going to be coming to some meetings next year anyway. Go ahead and sign up and get on a committee, and let's get you plugged in. You never know. In 6 or 7 years, you could be standing here just like me speaking to this crowd. So let me catch up on my little notes here. In closing, our future looks bright as an industry. Our future looks bright because our industry's future is bright. That being said, it's an industry in transition. New disruptors are emerging every year, and we've seen it. Our roles are evolving and emerging, but it's changing. Since its founding over 50 years ago, CCIM has been a force for good and a champion of fiduciary level professionalism in all phases of the real estate transaction. Through decades of industry innovation and disruption, CCIM has been there. We will be there for you now. We're going to be there tomorrow, and we're going to be there with you for the balance of your career. We're in this together. I mean globally, and I mean you and me, as president next year and as head of your chapter. Together, we are in this thing. I want to thank you for the time you've invested in CCIM. I want to thank you for the time you've invested in this training. And I want to thank you in advance for your leadership next year. Together, and I truly mean together, we will succeed. Thank you very much. Bobby, back to you.
Thank you, Tim. Such encouraging words. We appreciate it. And on your note of signing up for your volunteer positions on a national level, great time to announce that the submission date for such volunteering has been extended to this Friday. So again, it's such a tremendous opportunity for all of you volunteers out there to get involved on a national level. I personally and strongly encouraging it. That's going to be the end of our morning session. Such a tremendous amount of content that we've gotten from George and Tom and also Tim. A lot of this content is going to be the perfect setup for what we're going to have after our break in our regional setups. We'll be able to digest what we've learned from this morning and to start to think about how we can apply that to our particular regions and our chapter's benefit. So we're going to take a 15-minute break here. And after we come back from our 15-minute break, you'll use the same link that's on the Institute website, or you can just click the link that I just copied and pasted into chat. You'll come back in, and when you do, please make sure that you change the name of your profile here in Zoom to reflect what region it is that you are in so that we can allocate you to the appropriate room. If you need some reminders on how to do that, you'll just go to the participants box and you can find yourself on the attendees list, highlight over your name and click the More button. And when you see that, you can click rename and then just type your name, hyphen, and what region you are from, and staff will be able to put you into the appropriate room. So we'll see you in 15 minutes. Have a good break. Looking forward to the rest of the day. Take care.
And you will click the same, you wouldn't click the same link. You will click the link that's in the slide, or you can go to the website on the landing page and click that link.
So you can go to the Chapter Officer Training landing page and find the link there, or you can just highlight this link and copy and paste it now. See you in 15 minutes, everyone.
Thank you.